Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here with another edition of UFO News Network Sunday tonight on what's tonight? It's Thursday night. Thursday night, we're ready to go. No guest tonight. It's just me and my trusty sidekick with a little update on what's going on with these reported documents that are floating around. So let me bring in my sidekick, my co-host, my old pal, Chant Hannah. Chant, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing great, and that noise disappeared magically in the background. I don't know what happened there, but we are ready to go. We're going to do a little show tonight about the Admiral Wilson and alien autopsy and Edgar Mitchell documents, and we've got some new information for you. I think it's going to be pretty interesting, so you're going to want to tune in. We're finding out more about this stuff, and people are following up, doing some good stuff about it. And Chant, you want to get started? What do we got?
Yeah, we have some interesting things to go over tonight. I'll go ahead and start off with the first item, and that is a message from Spiros Milaris to Richard Dolan. I talked to Spiros earlier today, and at length, and he told me this: "Dear Chant, I am very concerned that Mr. Dolan is using my copyrighted materials to further enhance his stories, which are wholly and unequivocally untrue, and in the process casting concerns to third parties who now believe that I am in some way spreading misinformation when that is exactly what Mr. Dolan is doing here. I would like to give him the benefit of the doubt and ask him to please remove all of my materials from his sites and all media, and especially to retract what he's saying about my creation, the entire alien autopsy footage as released by Ray Santilli in 1995. There are no real frames from 1947. Santilli has never owned any genuine 1947 alien autopsy film, and this entire episode will end up in a very costly lawsuit for some. I do not want Mr. Dolan to continue without a fair written warning of the seriousness of his actions and the damages they are causing me, both in stress and financial. If you are able, please forward this to Mr. Dolan. Also, please ask him to contact me at my email address, which I will be forwarding on to Richard Dolan, myself, Frank. Mm-hmm. And I actually wonder if I should read that email address on live, but I'll go ahead and contact the Dolans and give them that information myself. And then he said, "Many thanks for your help in this matter, Spiros Milaris." And then he added the links to his sites, and that is www.spirosmilaris.com. And I'll read that. That's SPYROS, M as in mom, ELARIS.com. Then there's www.thealienoutopsy.com. And then he went on to say this: "To answer your question, Chant, in the cases where my materials are being used on monetized media, such as YouTube and subscription sites, etc., there will of course be a financial repercussion, as you might expect. I am always fair, but it seems that those abusing, in fact, stealing my materials, don't seem to consider the fact that it is copyright theft and illegal. That is what he had to say about that, Frank.
So it doesn't sound like he is really happy with Richard Dolan. And there have actually been three people involved in the UFO field who have been kind of out front supporting these documents to one extent or another. Dolan has probably been the furthest out there. That's I don't know, that's usually the case with him. He's usually pretty conservative, but for some reason he's really jumped on this and really pushed it. Grant Cameron, of course, he had these documents in his possession late last year. And then Stephen Greer, who is, of course, sort of the catalyst for the whole thing. He was the person involved in meeting along with the sixth man to walk on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, with Admiral Wilson and Commander Miller and a number of others in the Pentagon, talking about black projects and so on and so forth. And those are the three that have been the furthest out there. Again, Dolan's been the furthest. He's not held back at all in his support for these documents. Grant, a little, he held on to them for a little while. He acknowledged in interviews before they came out that, maybe he's got the biggest thing ever. Maybe he's going to end up with egg on his face. I think that maybe because Dolan came out, maybe out of loyalty or out of friendship, he's been a little bit more forthright. And of course, Greer is obviously, he likes the Admiral Wilson document. I mean, it shows him in a very good light. He was doing some very good work back in those days. There is certainly a percentage of UFO buffs who think if something comes from Stephen Greer that it's automatically crap and not to be trusted. But that's really not the case. Greer did a lot of great work back in the 90s. He was involved in that meeting along with Admiral Woolsey, which Woolsey rather famously, when news of that got out, he rather famously denied that he was particularly interested in the UFO subject, when in fact that meeting was set up by an individual named John Peterson. And when we had Dr. Joseph Burks on the show last year, he had mentioned that, and it was of great interest to me, so I really followed up. And, on a scale of 1 to 10 with, Greer being, telling the full truth being about a 10, and then the Woolsey-Peterson side being about a 0, I would put the scale maybe like around an 8, I think that from what I heard from Burks and from other sources regarding Peterson's interest in the UFO stuff, I think that that was a pretty legit event, and maybe, certainly they were in the office. They were in the office with Admiral Wilson. Nobody denies this, so maybe there's a little bit more to it. I do know that there are some researchers following up, attempting to identify who the chairman of this gatekeeper committee is, with this unnamed, even within the documents, defense contractor. I do know that a particular individual has been ID'd that a researcher that I hold in high regard seems to think would be that guy, could well be that guy. And of course, not surprised, I won't give you the guy's name. I'm not going to give that away because I've been asked not to do that. But the defense contractor, I think everybody could easily guess that we're talking about Lockheed Martin here. So that would be that. And it is very interesting. But Dolan he's gone out on a limb on this, and I'm not really sure why. Because we're in agreement, and a lot of other people, publicly and privately as well, are in agreement that these docs have been manufactured. But again. It goes back to something that Grant Cameron has said a number of times. He's probably even said it on this very show, is that we're going to tell you some things. Some of them are going to be true. Some of them are going to be false. And it's up to you to figure out which is which. And I think that's exactly what we're looking here. We're seeing some truth. We're seeing some made-up stuff. And it seems like... at least Dolan and maybe to a lesser extent Grant, and to an even a lesser extent Stephen Greer, are just not thinking that any of it is false and any of it is manufactured. Although, one interesting point, I haven't listened to every interview that every one of these guys have done, or every comment that they made about this. I haven't caught everything, but I've caught enough. I did think it was interesting. I think it was on the Jimmy Church show where Greer was talking at length about the number of different documents. And one point that he made when the NIDS letter to Dr. Edgar Mitchell was brought up, he described that letter being addressed to Mitchell as purported. So even, and you know, the main reason that I question that doc, and I'm jumping around a little bit here, but the main reason I question that doc is not so much that there's anything startling in the document, in the letter. We had somebody from NIDS take a look at it, and or was with NIDS take a look at it, and you know, it looked pretty ordinary to him. It looked legitimate, but because these other documents are such clearly cut and paste jobs, the way they're kind of slapped together, that it raises questions about that letter. I think under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have even questioned that letter, but the fact that it's tied to these two other documents, the Wilson notes and also the AA email exchanges and memorandums and notes that are attached to that, it does raise some questions about that. It's sort of a situation where somebody who lies to you consistently comes to you and say, hey, it's a sunny, nice day outside. Why aren't you outside? And you want to check and see if it's really sunny outside before you go out without a raincoat. Get my meaning? There's just the whole package is corrupted and manufactured, in my view. And so that is the reason that I'm skeptical about that. So we got pretty much everything to say about that NIDS letter out of the way. And you've got a little bit more about the alien autopsy video, I know.
And
okay, some other stuff too.
Yeah, I'm not even sure where to start because there's been so much ridiculous stuff said about the topic of the alien autopsy memo, the alien autopsy film, which is an 18-minute long film, and then also the smoking gun document, which is also known as the document of the century and the core secrets document. And I just found it rather interesting also that according to Michael W. Hall, Grant Cameron is supposed to be considered the most important person on the planet because he was given the smoking gun document. I don't understand why that is supposed to be the case, because, and I know it sounds a little silly to people, and I've said this before, but we are all peers here. No one is more important than anybody else. And a document or an alleged document does not make anybody more important than anyone else. So anyway, also I would like to mention, although it sounds a little random, that the burden of proof regarding a document or an alleged document lies with the person who's making the claim. And I just also have an issue with something that you and I had to go over regarding the smoking gun document with Michael Hall. Now, when I say smoking gun document, the word document in conjunction with smoking gun, I want to give a big disclaimer to everybody. I don't believe this is a real document. So when I say document, I'm not saying it in the sense that it's real. Okay, I say that with air quotes every time. Now, Michael Hall made it clear to us that this document was given to Grant Cameron, allegedly, I think at a UFO convention.
Yeah, it was Paula's conference. I think it was November of last year.
Right,
Paula
and
Harris.
the individual that allegedly gave this document to him, and he's also come forward to make sure that we understand it was him, James Rigney, handed this smoking gun document to Grant Cameron. And Grant Cameron held on to it. And we talked to Michael and asked Michael, why did Grant Cameron not do his due diligence on this document? What does due diligence means? All it means is doing one's research, meaning contacting folks who might be allegedly involved in the document if there's people being mentioned, which there are numerous people. And not one time did Grant Cameron actually contact a single individual in the amount of time that he held onto that document, according to Michael Hall. And Michael Hall said the reason for this is because he being Grant, he did not want to alert anyone to the document he was holding, and he did not want anyone to. He didn't want to raise any flags, so to speak, to let anyone know that he had this document. Now, the problem I have with this is, after the smoking gun document without redactions was let go on the internet for all to read, and it may have been there earlier, but everybody noticed it around the same time because I think it was posted on Reddit, and that alerted people to it right away, or on a site, on a sort of social media site where people would notice it right away. Right, Frank? Is that correct?
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is everybody in the UFO community, so to speak, I use that loosely, that what I'm saying there, everyone loosely, that term, that when everybody saw the smoking gun document, then my question to Grant is, since everybody knew about the smoking gun memo and it was no secret anymore and there were no redactions on it and everybody could see the names of everybody allegedly involved in it, why then did he not pick up the ball, run with it, and start calling and contacting all of these people? It took you 24 hours to do it, me 48. I was right behind you. What was so funny about that, by the way, is while you were busy contacting one person, I was doing my due diligence contacting the same individual. We just didn't even talk about it. That's how much research we had done.
We were working the program. That was a very interesting time because I gave Michael the heads up. We had no idea what we were going to find. We gave Michael a heads up. So there were some folks, it was a kind of a tough interview for him because we had him on that following Tuesday night. And we were tough on him. There's no doubt about it. I'm not sure he was really expecting that, but we were a little tough on him. But we told him, he knew that we were following out. We'd long expressed, I'd expressed my skepticism and been very specific about what to look out for and things like that.
Right.
Holy mackerel, there it all is,
So you did Michael a favor and gave him information about, I think it was, let's see, Commander Willard Miller, for him to contact him or for Grant to contact him.
Well, no. I said I was going to contact. We were looking to contact him.
But
we had no.
You did.
You did give Mike. Yeah,
you gave him a heads up.
That's the direction we were going in. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just leave it at that because I recall that there was a little bit more information shared with Michael about how to begin the process of contacting Commander Willard. But is that correct that you did that?
Yeah, but I told him we're taking this as far as we can. But even so, at that point in time, I had no idea we'd be successful. It turned out that we were,
Well, the point is whether you did share a little bit of information for Michael Hall to run on in order to contact Commander Willard, which, by the way, we're no experts on Commander Willard Miller regarding how to contact him. We had to do our own due diligence to find him ourselves also. Okay.
It wasn't that difficult, really. But, it took a little bit of time.
But anyway, Grant Cameron had all the opportunity on the planet to contact everybody involved, allegedly, in the smoking gun document. And according to Michael Hall, he did not.
Oh, well, yeah. And that's another thing, too. You got to remember there are some young guns out there like Danny Silva, James Yondoli, Joe Murgia. At least Danny and James knew that this had already been posted because there was a Reddit post about it. And they gave Grant the heads up right away. And I'm thinking, what kind of research is that? I wanted to see these docs absolutely when I first heard about them, one way or the other. Let's find out what's in there and let's dig in and find out. That's what researchers are supposed to do. And the idea of sitting on it or passing the word along to Grant when this stuff is already out. This is out. Once something's out, it's out. And once it's posted publicly on Imgur and anybody who has the link can access it,
Right.
You go. Again, if you're a researcher, you go do your job. You go do what you're supposed to do. You go research. You follow up.
Right.
As much as higher regard as I hold Grant in and James as well. You don't sit on this kind of thing. You follow up on it.
Okay, so I just, like I said, the burden of proof lies with the individual making the claim. Who's making the claim? The claim is being made by Michael Hall and Grant Cameron. That Grant Cameron is the most important person on the planet because he has a document called the Smoking Gun or the Core Secrets document, or also called the Document of the Century, and which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But anyway, and that in addition to that the document is real as it stands. Now, it's too bad that we're being used for a lesson in misclassification error here regarding this alleged doc. What evidence and proof are in reality compared to what people have brought forward and tacked on their so-called data, two different things. There has been an egregious misclassification error in calling these the so-called document as authentic as it stands in its entirety. If we are to accept in totality what Richard Dolan, Grant Cameron, Michael Hall, Melinda Leslie, and many others are saying, is so-called evidence, that is what we have to rely upon rather than circumstantial evidence to prove this hoax is real as it stands, is not acceptable. Even worse, according to Melinda Leslie, we're supposed to believe the people who allegedly perpetrated these hoaxes are not allowed, according to her, supposed to admit they did do their due, that they are involved, due to their being in a unique position of not being able to reveal their alleged true role in these hoaxes, which I do not accept. And also allows folks in her position to not provide circumstantial evidence to back up that this document is real. Now, this type of skewed logic does not apply because it makes no sense, and in fact further proves the innocence of the people who have been thrust into the alleged roles they are supposed to have played in these hoaxed documents. Now, if Kit Green, moving on to, do you want to move on to Kit Green, or do you want me to stick with the smoking gun?
Yeah, no, jump into the alien autopsy stuff too.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up the smoking gun and alien autopsy memo together, but I will be sure to refer to each one when I'm talking about each one so folks can follow.
Okay.
Now, the alien autopsy memo. If Kit Green really believes he played a role in this Bigelow memo, then why does he, one, not know Hal Puthoff's first name? He calls him Halbert instead of Harold. You would think, since they are peers, he would actually know the name of his own colleague, right, Frank? Right?
Yeah, you would think so. You would think so. There are a few things that were pointed out that are a little strange about the exchange.
Yes.
They're interesting.
Hold on.
They're interesting.
Hold on. Yes. and if he's wrong, he would definitely have corrected himself by now, since he is acutely aware of these emails. How do we know he is? Because Richard Dolan interviewed him, apparently a few times. Now, regarding the alien autopsy.
Let me jump in here too.
Go ahead.
That exchange was under some very odd circumstances. He doesn't want to. Green doesn't want to be quoted directly, and so on. Basically, apparently at some point in time, at least part of the email exchanges are in fact accurate. That Green has acknowledged as much, and that at one point in time he did think that there was legitimacy to the alien autopsy video. He's changed his mind on that, of course. It's kind of a no-brainer at this point to know that the alien autopsy video is a complete fabrication, that there are no legitimate frames from a original film that was destroyed or due to time and weathering and whatnot is no longer playable, and it just... it never happened. There's not a single aspect of the alien autopsy video that's legitimate. And Green realizes that now, but apparently at one point in time he didn't, and it sort of came out that these private email exchanges indicated that he did, and obviously, Hey, I mean, if I had a private exchange with you 20 years ago about those about that video, I thought, hey, Chant, I think this might be legit, and you probably would have smacked me upside my head and say, snap out of it. But that apparently wasn't the case during the course of these exchanges, and that didn't come about until later. So again, it goes back to that kind of famous quote that I've heard Grant use many times. Some of it's true, some of it's not true, and you got to figure out what's what. And we also know that how the alien autopsy memo is rather oddly constructed. How the
Frank,
yes.
let me finish.
Okay.
Okay. Now, so we know that Hal Puthoff should have called his his colleague, Kit Green should have called Hal Harold, if he was going to use a full name rather than Halbert, in the alien autopsy memo. Now, moving along, number 2, brain rugae. In the alien autopsy memo, when you go into that, you will see it's very clear that Kit refers to the brain as rugae. Rugae is not a part of the brain. That is a part of the stomach area. And it's really important that people understand that he actually made that mistake. Now, this person is a scientist. Is that right? Or he's a doctor?
Yeah.
Is that right?
He's a medical doctor. Yeah.
Okay. And so I just would like to know, why would he not understand that the brain rugae has to do with there's no such thing, and that has to do with the stomach area of the body.
Yeah. Well, there are a few things in there that.
Let me finish, please.
All right.
Thank you.
You asked me a question. I was going to go, and I was going to answer.
Well, I mean, go ahead, but I still have to finish what I have to say.
Sure. We have all night and into tomorrow. I don't have to be to work for another 15 hours. We got that kind of time.
Okay.
So I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I was talking about brain rugae, which was so odd, because that has nothing to do with the brain. It has to do with the stomach. And you would think that a person in Kit's position would actually know that. So you were going to comment on that.
Yeah, basically, I think this comes down to the rather odd, this alien autopsy document it's a word processing document. There's no question about that. Okay. So it was ginned up in a word processor, and it includes emails, which obviously were copied and pasted over. So lots of different things could have been inserted in there, like the unusual email addresses with John Alexander, and I believe also Hal Puthoff having GM General Motors email addresses, when in fact...
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go over that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and finish this up. And I'm sorry, I actually wanted to make sure that I get this correct when I talk about it. It'll just take a second. Okay. Let me see if I can find that. Just one moment.
Sure.
Okay. So I lost my train of thought.
Okay, yeah. Let me talk a little bit about the word processing nature of this particular document.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, we've also heard from Commander Will.
I'll just finish. I just have a few more sentences. I'm sorry. I might as well finish this because it's just going to bug me.
You might as well. Okay.
Okay. Now, the brain does not have regularity. It that's relegated to the stomach area of the body. Why would Kit Green actually call part of the body an incorrect name when that is not what it's assigned to it? Which is number 3.
Can I answer that, because I think that might
after I'm done. Let me finish this. Number 3, the email addresses are wrong. Okay, in the alien autopsy memo, it specifically states that John Alexander's email address is located in General Motors in Singapore. Now, I talked to John Alexander, and he told me that he not only never worked for General Motors, that he also never worked in Singapore. Now, Hal Puthoff also has an email address in the alien autopsy memo, and it is, according to the email address listed, for General Motors in Singapore, same as John Alexander. And Hal Puthoff never worked for General Motors or in Singapore, according to John Alexander, who has known Hal Puthoff for decades. Now the email headers don't make any sense either. I don't mean all of them. There's an email header in the alien autopsy memo, which, if you look at it very closely, actually makes no sense whatsoever. It looks like it was literally copied and pasted, like stitched together. And there's really no way, according to the research I've done, that an email would have a header like that. Now, the other thing, which is number 5, is there's no such thing as the alien autopsy movie before 1995, because the alien autopsy movie was not made before 1995. Now, why do I bring that up? Because my understanding, according to Philip Mantle, an individual who is a person who he publishes books, and he also has been a researcher involved in ufology for decades. He said this, that he told Richard Dolan there was no way Kit Green could have seen the same thing as depicted in the alien autopsy film at a briefing at the Pentagon in 1987 or 1988, unless he had a time machine. In the leaked memo, Kit Green then went on to deliver his professional opinion on the alien autopsy film. At no point did he say it was human and alien or a dummy. He stated it was real, that it was his professional opinion. Richard told Philip Mantle how very clever this man apparently is. Well, he wasn't that clever, was he? That is what Philip Mantle said in the thread of a post about Richard Dolan and this topic. So it's important that that distinction is made clear. Okay. And then also, let's see what else. I think there was another thing.
And I've got that particular email up now, so folks can see it with the Puthoff and Alexander GM Singapore email addresses.
Good. And there's a super odd paragraph of a rant regarding a worldwide New World Order conspiracy, so to speak, that is both unprovable and sounds uneducated, silly, and paranoid by Kit Green. Now, does that make it not real? No. It's just something I wanted to mention that I find is very strange to have in that series of emails where there's a bunch of scientists or folks of high caliber regarding their education, talking about a really strange topic that has absolutely no support, nothing to back up or prove regarding what Kit is allegedly saying in that rant.
Right, and I think the explanation, I think, is that someone got hold of original documents and obviously ginned a lot of stuff up in there, doctored the text and played around with it the same way that Will Miller claimed that his letter, or his purported letter to Eric Davis, was manipulated, and different pieces from different correspondences were cut and pasted together. So I think that's, and especially in a case like this where you're talking about a word processing doc, something like that wouldn't have, anybody could do it,
Right. Yeah. Now, what does all this error feeding regarding contaminating these alleged docs with inaccuracies? What does this do? These people are trying too hard to prove something that is not provable. The best interpreter of what really happened here with the smoking gun document and the alien autopsy memo are evidence, facts, and proof. And the evidence and the facts are these alleged documents do not stand as real as they are in their entirety. There's no corroborating evidence or additional evidence that we have to go on regarding these alleged documents to reveal them as real in any way, shape, or form. So what have we learned regarding everything that has been pushed at us in the UFO community regarding these alleged documents? And that we are supposed to accept the worst kind of alleged data, possible that these supposed documents are real, that they are real, even though the so-called evidence and proof people are bringing to the table is false, even though what has been brought forward violates the actual fundamental principles of what is supposed to be evidence and proof? Why? This is the question we need to ask. Why would all of these people try so hard to make something that is a fairy tale come true? What do they have to gain from this? Let's go into this now.
Okay.
Now,
well, for Greer, this the Wilson meeting was a big deal. So the fact that the document comes out and purports to basically verify what he's been saying, that's a big deal for him. So I don't really have a problem with him getting behind that. And to his credit, I think he was a little bit more circumspect about that NIDS letter to Mitchell. So I think that's very interesting. But I don't really blame him for that. And with a Grant situation, it might just be, like I said earlier, perhaps a little bit of loyalty to Dolan, because he himself was willing to admit that maybe I got something, maybe I don't. So, and it's really been Dolan who's kind of been out there leading the charge that these documents are the leak of the century, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Okay. Now, Dolan has had a multitude of podcasts on this very topic, shopping the AAM as real. Now, maybe he's not doing that anymore, but in the beginning, it certainly seemed to you and I that he was shopping around the alien autopsy memo. I call that the AAM, just so everybody understands what I'm talking about, as real. What do you think about that? Is that correct, Frank?
Well, my understanding from the last time that I heard him, that this isn't going to go away, that they're still working on it. And in fact, I do know that that's the case. But what I know that is being followed up on are the basic, the structure of these unacknowledged programs, these special access programs, and who might be managing the corporate end for Lockheed. You know, obviously a former top-notch officer who's gone into the private sector, who's kind of shepherding these types of programs along, keeping an eye on them, making sure that the prying eyes don't really find out what's going on. That is my understanding of what's being looked at. How plugged in Dolan is to all that, I really don't know, but I do know some good researchers are working on that, and that's a good thing. That's A-okay. You know, in the UFO racket, I mean, there's no such thing as a fast nickel. Everything is slow dimes. It takes a while. So if it's been, 20 years since that initial Greer, Wilson, Miller, Mitchell meeting took place, and we find out more about it now, that's kind of par for the course. That's no big deal. I had said even before this stuff came out, even if they are fake, there might be some value in there. And obviously, there are some folks who are looking at the value, and they're on it. And I say good luck. Hopefully, we do find out more about it. But the idea of purporting these documents to be legitimate in that effort is a mistake. I think, again, you should go back to Grant Cameron's quote. Some of it's true, some of it's false, and you got to figure out which is which.
Okay, that quote that you keep talking about from
like
Grant Cameron.
He's right.
I'm glad
he was right at that point.
Okay. Yeah, right, but he did not say that in conjunction with these.
That's right. Right. And I don't know why.
But you need to make that clear, because what you're doing is you're using a quote of Grant's that he is not applying, which he should be.
Well, exactly.
Regarding but you need to make that clear, because people don't know. When you say that, he might be saying that in conjunction with this, which he's not, which is unfortunate.
He's not.
Because he should.
And all of them have. All Dolan, Greer, and Grant have spoken over the years at great length about disinformation. And, here's some disinformation, and they're embracing it. It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Okay. Well, now, Grant Cameron, the person who alleges he was given this hoax doc by another person, James Rigney, and also Grant's lawyer, Michael Hall, all claim these things are real as they stand. What do they have to gain by saying the AAM is real? Now hold on, let me finish. Melinda Leslie, same situation, says they are real. The list is much longer than the amount of players that I'm mentioning here, all claiming these docs are real as they stand. There's another group of people, we won't mention who they are. They all hang out together, and they all, I guess, call themselves researchers regarding the topic of the AAM and SG, which stands for Smoking Gun Document, but they have not come forward with anything regarding facts, evidence, and proof to actually unequivocally state or prove that these two items are real as they stand in their entirety. Now, let's go over what data, evidence, and facts and proof really are. Now, it's very simple. Evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. Now, facts, that is a thing that is known or proved to be true. Proof, that is evidence or an argument establishing or helping to establish a fact or the truth of a statement. None of these things have happened with the alien autopsy memo and the smoking gun document. Now, we've had anecdotal stories. We've had a lot of podcasts. We've not had any of that happen yet. Now, what we've established, now that we've established what evidence, facts, and proof are, my point is this. All these players that are involved in this game of claiming these alleged docs are real, we either have to believe that, one, they really believe, despite evidence and facts to the contrary, that these people do not know what those are, evidence, facts, or proof, that they don't know what that is. Two, that they're not intelligent enough to know what it is, meaning they have not educated themselves on the classic definition of what these terms really mean. Three, or they refuse to believe what evidence, facts, or proof is because they have an agenda. Four, is that they or someone in the mix here designed this document for reasons unknown to us. Five, it helps to revive a person's career. Six, an intelligence agent designed the AAM and SG for kicks, either by themselves or with the help of an inside person or an expert on hoaxing genuine-looking documents. Seven, a government created this elaborate hoax to keep the topic of ufology as a fringe topic and to firmly set us in place as a topic of hilarity, to be made fun of, to not take seriously, especially since some of the science of it is wrong, brain reggae, for example, and the history of it cannot be corroborated, meaning the Singaporean conspiracy reference that Kit made in the AAM, among many other pseudo-historical statements being made by him regarding it doesn't matter. Anyway, number 8, getting evidence, facts, and proof requires too much work. Now, we must be vigilant and methodical when researching for facts, evidence, or proof. I know this takes a lot of work, okay? But this is the only manner in which research is taken seriously outside of ufology, and it is also the most logical approach to the phenomenon and other topics we all love to learn more about. We have been fed a lot of error feeding regarding these documents. There's a lot of anomalies in the sense of discrepancies, and how there are more than a handful of those in the AAM and the SG, and how it's unusual, how one or two might, it's okay if one or two discrepancies, that might be expected regarding a document for people to go over if somebody's claiming it's real. Okay, catch a few of them. But the large number of anomalies that do not fit into the categories of facts, evidence, or proof, and all fall into the categories of error, strange commentary, discrepancies, and total fiction, that's when red flags should be raised regarding the possibility that we're not only looking at a document that's not authentic, but are looking instead at an elaborately designed hoax. Let's look at this in more detail.
Oh, okay. And
go ahead.
Yeah, a real quick point. Number one, another thing that you didn't mention was the fact that the Wilson notes contain a lot of the same tropes that have been included in known disinformation, like the MJ12 documents and more specifically the Serpo documents, which nobody thinks is legitimate. I think just about everybody recognizes that they are hoax documents. There's nothing legitimate about those at all. And those tropes were something that I mentioned even before this document came out. And one thing, I'll tell you what, I'm glad this document came out, because when we had Michael on the show before the docs came out, I said the best thing that can happen is for this stuff to come out and let's all have a crack at it and see what's what. And as it turned out, that's exactly what happened, and I'm glad it did, because despite our criticisms of some other researchers that are maybe taking this stuff too lightly and not backing up their claims with much of anything, to tell you the truth, these documents, they're out there now, and we've all got our crack at it. And I think that's a good thing. And that's what research is all about. And frankly, even though it is, in my opinion, disinformation, as you had mentioned, this is professionally put together. Likely, I would even go so far to say as somebody who at least has some knowledge of the workings of AFIO. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I'd never heard of the Association of Former Intelligence Officers before all this stuff came out. I had to look it up.
I think it's important that you let everybody know who is a member of AFIO according to your research.
Eric Davis.
Yes, and that means he's a member of the intelligence community. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
So let's clear this up.
Yeah, he has been involved in classified programs. He has security clearances. Okay. To what level, I'm not sure exactly what.
Good to know.
But AFIO membership is relatively open. I mean, you don't have to be like a former CIA agent to join AFIO. You can be a journalist. You could be. You could probably join AFIO.
That's not going to happen. Now, hey. I do want to let folks know who we have interviewed regarding the alien autopsy memo and the smoking gun documents. And again, I don't believe they're real documents. So when I say the word documents, I say that with air quotes. Now, we have interviewed both Frank and I separately, Commander Willard Miller. I have done it multiple times, and Frank has also interviewed him. We've interviewed Michael W. Hall. We've interviewed. I have talked to Philip Mantle.
I have too. And there was we had a little exchange. Is it okay? May I have a moment to go into some detail about that?
Hold on to that thought because I'm going to mention a list of people.
All right.
We've interviewed. Now, if people go, who is that? What you need to understand is if you don't know who any of these people are, they are still in some one way or another connected to the alien autopsy memo, more than likely, and the smoking gun document. And I believe Philip Mantle might actually be directly mentioned in the alien autopsy memo. Now, so I've talked to Philip Mantle multiple times. Spiros Milaris, I have actually interviewed him and talked to him many times about this topic. Ray Santilli, I interviewed him for 45 minutes. That's something almost nobody knows. And it was about the alien autopsy movie, of course. And I also interviewed multiple times, a total of 2.5 hours, Gary Shufield of the alien autopsy film. And he, along with Ray, both agree that they're very good friends. And Melinda Leslie, we've interviewed her on our podcast regarding these topics. And interestingly enough, we did not see eye to eye with her on the AAM and the SG. And then also, I did actually find an individual regarding the pepper spray company in the smoking gun document. I was able to contact that company. They did call me back. I will be talking to them soon. And that's important because Willard Miller said that he believed that that company was out of business. It turns out they're not. They're still in business. Go ahead on what you were talking about, Frank, please.
Again, I might lost my train of thought.
Well, I was mentioning Ray Santilli, Gary Shufield.
Talking with Phil Mantle.
Go ahead.
Obviously, we are quite convinced that these documents have been manufactured in some way. And in our conversation, first, he obviously believes that too. The whole kit and caboodle is manufactured. But he dropped the name, and I don't know if I've done it on the show yet or not. But he dropped the name Rick Doty, and my response was, I haven't ruled him out. And one interesting side note, you had mentioned perhaps some people who are taking advantage of this may have been involved in the actual construction. And I just point out, not saying anything beyond this, but I do just point out that in Stephen Greer's most recent movie, Unacknowledged, he had Doty featured in the film, and went so far as to portray him as a heroic whistleblower, which we both know from some conversations that we've had. There are some people in the field, namely Alejandro Rojas and Shane Hurd, who obviously don't agree with that characterization at all. They're quite even more negative than I am on Rick Doty. So Rick Doty does have some haters out there. There's no question about that. But I do mention that in passing. And this is the kind of thing that. Well, if you ever get the chance to watch the movie documentary Mirage Men, you might want to take a look at it. And I also note we've talked about this at some length on the show. Doty's mentioned during the TTSA Unidentified series. Lou Elizondo couldn't have been, I think, more vociferous in his condemnation of Doty, basically coming out and saying, "I'm not Rick Doty." And it does seem that has Doty gets that reaction from some people who are definitely insiders in the field, because I do note that someone was comparing Ron Pandolfi, who basically held the same spot in the CIA that Kid Green did after Green moved along, that he took over that spot, and that kind of drew him out of the woodwork. He didn't take too kindly to that, and definitely Doty's not a popular guy. Another thing I note regarding Doty is that Grant Cameron has written that he has spoken recently to Doty and found it very enlightening, which I find an unfortunate thing to say.
Okay, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to drop the link to the smoking gun document right there so everybody can actually see it.
Yep.
Because, one thing, and I'm going to drop the a link to the alien autopsy memo also in this talk, because one thing I have noticed that podcasters have not done, I'm not sure if we're guilty of this. I have to check to see if we have included this information in other podcasts. If not, I apologize for not having done that. But I don't think that we have shared these links enough with the public so that they can understand what the hell we're talking about. They should at least be able to actually go and look at these documents, whether they think they're real or faked, right?
Well,
so
we have
I
confidence
just dropped,
on our audience. We know they're well informed.
But still, it's still important to share something like that. So I just shared in the chat room for our podcast the link to the Smoking Gun doc, which is also known as the Document of the Century, and the Core Secrets memo or Core Secrets document. Now, what I wanted to do was also...
That is the docs.google.com.
Yes, that is what that is. Let me go ahead and just one moment. Let me go ahead and state that. Hold on. That is the link to the Smoking Gun doc. Just one second. And do you have the link? Okay, go ahead and put down the link to the alien autopsy memo, if that's what it was that you just shared.
No, actually it is not. This is actually what I just shared, the web.archive.org. That is a link to an article from Jane's Defense, which covers in some detail how special access programs operate, which is basically what Greer and Mitchell and Wilson and Miller were talking about.
Okay, and do you have that the alien autopsy link? Because do you have that or not?
I do not have that handy. I could probably find it.
Okay, find it. If you can't, I know I have that somewhere. While you're looking for that, what I was going to do is read something that I have never read before, and it is an astounding interview that I did with Commander Willard Miller that I have not published yet. And this is what he said when I talked to him recently. I asked him, which portions of this purported letter attributed to yourself is something that you may have written or potentially discussed with Dr. Eric Davis? He says he does not recall ever talking to Eric Davis about anything. Were you ever interested in finding out about the noted pepper spray manufacturing company mentioned in the correspondence, or do you recall knowing of its officer, Mr. Zucchero? His answer is he knew Joe Zucchero only in the sense of the company, and the company when he was working in the non-lethal weapons technology, but he would never put those two things together, meaning he would not put that paragraph in that letter either. It was anomalous looking to him. And he also said the company went out of business and he never found out anything because, again, the company went out of business. Now, these questions here, I believe, were actually posed by Michael Hall for me to ask Commander Willard Miller. So it's important that people understand that, because what happened is after Michael Hall and you and I had an interview with Michael this year on this topic, I asked him, what would you like me to ask Commander Willard Miller? Because I knew I was going to talk to him again. And he sent me a series of questions and to ask him. And so I asked these on Michael's behalf. And then I also asked other questions of my own of Commander Miller.
There was one quote from Commander Miller that you had passed on to me. I actually turned it into a graphic, which I've got up now, but I'll read that really quick. What is also strange to me, knowing how very much averse Admiral Wilson is to this subject, meaning UFOs, that he would have met with Eric Davis and divulged this much information. So I thought that was an interesting quote as well.
Yes, that is, absolutely. Now, the next question is, did you know or attend the proposed meeting mentioned with the force model of the universe, levitation, teleportation, and time travel, scientist Mr. Beckwith, mentioned at the beginning of the letter? His answer, he did meet with Bob Beckwith, but only mainly to get a tour of the high magnetic field facility near Tallahassee, Florida. He was a good friend of his. He was a good man. He had firsthand data on the Philadelphia experiment. And then so I went ahead and asked Miller to expound upon this, I believe, regarding this topic. And Commander Miller said, purportedly, it was the U.S. Eldridge, but Bob said it had nothing to do with that ship. It had to do with the vessel, and he has the picture of it. And after he found that pic, he had it framed for him. I believe, by the way, just so everybody knows, that Commander Miller is saying that he had this picture framed for Bob Beckwith. Then Miller goes on to say, at that time, Bob Beckwith was working for GE. He said Tesla's name did come up, but it was not mentioned, but only indirectly regarding that experiment, because I actually asked Commander Miller about Tesla. Now, the next question, do you remember attending the original Pentagon briefing with Admiral Wilson, Dr. Stephen Greer, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, yourself, and others on or about April 9th, 1997? Now, I want to share something with the audience here. You have no idea how important this question is to some researchers. This is an iconic question, so to speak. This question actually has been addressed a few times in the UFO community to a few people that are absolutely legendary. And their answers have been amazing. Now, I posed this question that Michael Hall asked me to ask Commander Willard Miller, and I'll ask it again so you can hear the answer that he gave. Do you remember attending the original Pentagon briefing meeting with Admiral Wilson, Dr. Stephen Greer, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, yourself, and others on or about April 9th, 1997? What was discussed at that meeting? His answer, oh, yeah. Then I said, do you remember what was discussed at that meeting? I asked him again. His answer, only vaguely, but it was mainly us providing info to Admiral Wilson, not the other way around. Yeah, only the very most general kind of thing. It was really to provide info on what is going on in the civilian UFO investigation community worldwide. That was basically the purpose of the meeting. And it was not to try to ferret out information from the Pentagon or the government or him or anything else. It was basically providing information and maybe asking the question, from his perspective, did the U.S. government take this subject seriously and worthy of further investigation? And there was, as I recall, no positive answer on that either. He asked if I was familiar with former Lockheed Ben Rich regarding what he... Okay, so that was the end of that. And there was, as I recall, no positive answer on that either. Now, it's going to be really interesting how the UFO community reacts to that, because that actually has been asked, I believe, of Dr. Stephen Greer and also Admiral Wilson. So to have Commander Willard Miller fill in the gap on what we wanted to hear from him on that topic is really going to be really interesting to see the reactions from folks in the UFO community on that. Now, then Commander Willard Miller, throughout our discussion, he asked if I was familiar with former Lockheed Ben Rich regarding what he has said in the past based on the topic of ufology and other things. And that would lead him to believe that we have our own craft, is what he said, that he believes we have our own craft, that he would surmise it was derived from ET technology. Because I asked him, do you believe that since we do have our own craft, was it derived from ET technology? He said he did believe that. Then he said his question is, why is our entire space program based on a 3,000-year-old Chinese rocket technology? If in fact we do have anti-gravity banned, much better non-polluting ways to get around, much better and faster, why the heck don't we use it? Do we not use it? And so that's interesting that he said that. He also said that the April 25th, because I shared my screen with him on Skype, and I went over very carefully the smoking gun document with him in multiple interviews. And he said that the April 25th, 2002 date, because I made note of that with him, I brought it to his attention. And he said the fact that that date shows there, and it shows there will be a conference call in a paragraph located in the letter that he allegedly wrote, which he said he did not write, in that Eric Davis journal called the Smoking Gun Document. That April 25th, 2002 shows up at the top of the letter, and then it also shows in a paragraph in the letter that there will be a conference call on the 25th. That it's odd that it coincides with that date. He and I found that as a strange. That's just a strange situation there in that letter. The address and the city are not lined up correctly. He would not have a space in front of the first paragraph of the first part of the address. The address also would be left or right justified, one or the other, not in the manner in which it is partially underneath the insignia. He said, which was a poor form. It was a bad copy, that insignia, and that he is a type A personality, and he doesn't like things that are askew. And said he did meet with Bob Beckwith, as we said earlier, said the meeting was not about what was allegedly stated in the letter, and he doesn't know how anyone got that meeting information. Now, it's interesting that he said that, because it's important for everybody to understand somebody designed this letter. They found out, oddly enough, that Commander Willard Miller had a meeting with Mr. Beckwith and inserted that information in this stitched together, cut and paste letter that was attributed to Commander Willard Miller as having written it when he did not. So we have a person who has actually put together a fake letter to disseminate disinformation. Now, regarding his signature, he doesn't know if that's his own signature. Believe it or not, that's what he said. So I actually really pressed him on this. And he said his own signature has changed over a period of time. He said it's hard to say, meaning, again, when I asked him, are you sure that's not your signature? And we went over the looping of it and the manner in which the signature was shaped. And he said he cannot tell from that time frame whether that was his signature or not. He said over a period of time, again, he repeated that his signature has changed. He said he has lost a lot of files during that period of time also, and that he has files on floppy disks and nothing to read them with. He said there are some controversial claims about the nature of that project, which was the Philadelphia experiment, because that was brought up again later in the conversation. And anti-gravity technology, basically, we'll talk about that later. But
okay. And another thing, you brought up a point about that Beckwith meeting that.
Yes, go ahead.
And also, there was another thing that clearly whoever put this stuff together had some insider information, knew some stuff because there is at length some mentioning of the fact that the Las Vegas chapter of AFIO, again, the Association of Former Intelligence Officers, was brand new. And they needed to get that off the ground. And in fact, in September of that year, when this meeting between Davis and Wilson is purported to have taken place, that that AFIO chapter, that new chapter in Vegas, had their very first meeting. And that is available in the AFIO newsletter at their website on a PDF. And if you look in the I've got that graphic, a screen grab from that newsletter, and in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see in October, the new AFIO Las Vegas chapter held its first meeting. So there it is right there. So somebody knew a lot of stuff to put this together, no question about it. Can't deny that. This
you
was not
cut in and out.
This was not some sort of armchair effort. This is somebody who knows their stuff and is definitely an insider who put this together.
Okay, you cut in and out right when I was listening to see if you had actually said about the research you wanted me to do on Commander Willard Miller ever having been in Las Vegas. Did you talk about that?
No, I have not mentioned that yet. Not that.
So
no,
go ahead.
Wilson. That is the one thing that they have had a couple months, actually more than a couple months, to do some research and see if they can actually place Admiral Wilson in Las Vegas on the day of the meeting. Of course, we've got someone from AFIO on the record as saying that I'm a charter member of the Las Vegas chapter of AFIO and have served as an officer continuously. I can state without equivocation that at no time in any year did we have Admiral Wilson as a speaker, that he had any part in starting the chapter is patently false. So actually, when I started looking at this, I thought that there was probably a better than 50-50 chance that Wilson would have actually been in Vegas on that particular date. But at this point in time, they have not demonstrated at all that he was anywhere near Las Vegas on the particular date. And of course, if he's not in Las Vegas on that particular date, I think it was October 6th. I'd have to pull up the document, but I believe it was October 6th of that year, 2002, as I recall. Then the doc is a fake. That pretty much proves it. If he was in Cleveland or Columbus or Pittsburgh or somewhere else, somewhere other than Vegas, that proves beyond any question that these documents are manufactured, or at least the Wilson doc is manufactured. And
yes.
plus, we've got Commander Miller on the record about the letter that's included in there, and the curious cut and paste nature of the alien autopsy emails, and then sort of like the nondescript nature of the letter from NIDS from Bigelow to Edgar Mitchell. So we've got all that, and that adds up to I think quite a bit that creates some real problems for the pro-doc people.
Exactly. So did you have anything else that you wanted to bring up? I know I have a few things that I wanted to bring up. It's up to you.
Let me talk about some of the things that Dolan has talked about that have not come to pass. Number one, calling this the leak of the century. That was obviously a little bit of hyperbole. But he also said that the news media would be picking up on this. That certainly has not happened in any way, shape, or form. The news media is covering a lot of things. New news is coming out every day. But this particular story has not attracted their attention in any way, shape, or form. It did back in the day when Billy Cox followed up with Admiral Wilson himself a number of years ago about this particular meeting. And then, of course, Wilson denied that much of anything came of it, just as Commander Miller had said. That was kind of it, and that was a decade ago now. I think maybe even more than a decade. And now we haven't seen the news media pick up on this. But the bottom line is this, and I said this the first night that we had Michael on, you pretty much have to prove that Admiral Wilson was in Vegas, and they haven't done that yet. And I'm not sure that any effort is going into that. Thomas Wilson's a pretty common name, so he's not that easy a guy to find. At least he hasn't been for me yet. I did put some effort into it earlier on, but I've not been able to track him down. But was he in Vegas on that day? Again, when this all started, I thought that there was a pretty good chance that he was, that these documents are that well researched. But after getting this quote from the AFIO officer and reading the Periscope newsletter from AFIO, I would say that is less likely the case now.
Okay.
So I think that's about where that is.
All right. If you have any more comments, please do go ahead and make them.
Yeah, I think I've covered all the new stuff. We keep hearing that more stuff is going to come out, but to be honest with you, nothing in the way of evidence. The new evidence that's been ginned up, good, bad, and indifferent. I mean, stuff like Eric Davis being a member of AFIO. I think that's interesting. The fact that the AFIO chapter was brand spanking new on the date that this meeting is purported to take place. That's something that you would think that they could run with that. They could take that and run with that, but they're not. They're not even going with that. There's literally no new evidence. It's just this consensus is built up that these documents come from Edgar Mitchell. Well, there's no consensus there. There's Dolan talking about it. Maybe a couple other people. Grant, I think, has mentioned it. Maybe he has. I can't recall specifically. But there's no proof that this package of documents came from Edgar Mitchell. I mean, it might have, and even if it did, it still doesn't make the documents true. But again, that's not a consensus. That's just a bunch of people sitting around agreeing with each other and just sort of investigating by proclamation.
Okay, yes. And okay, I'm glad you said that, because there's been a lot of yes men, so to speak, regarding everybody. There's a clique of people that all run together and want to all agree with each other, which is how they've come off to us about these two alleged documents, smoking gun and the AAM. And I find it interesting that they would do that. It's sort of a support network for each other. And, there's really no need to have, try and run with the popular crowd on something like this, because I would rather not be in the popular crowd, so to speak, or a clique of people where we're acting like yes men to validate each other and rely on evidence, facts, and proof. By the way, proof is very elusive. It's very hard to get that. And then undermine ourselves and go along with, the trendy thing to do, or whatever it is, everybody trying to go along with each other. Now, wanted to bring up something about Melinda Leslie, and that is, on our show when we interviewed her, the gist of one of her main points about why we need to believe her that the smoking gun document is real in its entirety is something that she had to say, and that was that no comment, it would be a breach of security regarding anything that's classified. And I basically had a problem with that, because that makes no sense. And that is that a no comment would be a breach of security. Well, then all the people I have interviewed regarding the smoking gun and the AAM who have been under classified, have had the opportunity to be involved in classified material or projects or whatever, by virtue of them talking to deny they've been involved in any of this, means that they've already breached security. Now, I talked to John Alexander about this, who for well over 3 decades was involved in the intelligence community. He worked for the Pentagon. He said that was absolutely not true, what Melinda Leslie was postulating.
And of course, let me jump in really quick.
And he said it's actually factually incorrect.
Yeah, because and we know this because Lou Elizondo's been running around doing interviews, and there are things that he can't talk about, and because of classification. It's like, if you ask him a question he can't answer, he's not going to sit there and just say nothing. He'll say he can't answer it, or no comment. It's the same thing. I can't answer that, or no comment. It's essentially the same answer. So, of course, the fact that he's doing interviews and he might get asked a question that he can't answer, well, he's going to say either no comment or something to that effect, like I can't answer that. So, of course, we know that's not accurate.
Right. So what she said was, if anything in the document, even if one sentence refers to something classified, we cannot comment in any way on the whole entire document. If there's one sentence there, we can't comment on it. That's what she said. I'll
Yeah.
repeat it. If anything in the document, even one sentence, refers to something classified, we cannot comment in any way on the whole entire document. If there's one sentence there, we can't comment on it. And then I asked her this: what about what Dr. Mitchell allegedly said in an interview, which I still have to confirm whether he really said this or not, and that is, no comment would be a breach of security. And she said that is exactly what she was, that basically is what she was saying. And so I brought that to attention of John Alexander because she agreed with that. And he knew Dr. Edgar Mitchell. They were great friends. He told me he'd been to his house numerous times and that they were close friends. And he said, that is absolutely not true, what she is postulating there. And so it's important that people understand that. Why? The reason why is because that kind of illogic or lack of logic disallows people from being able to accurately deny that they've been allegedly involved in something when they have not. And what she was doing throughout the entire interview was stating that the people in the smoking gun memo were actually involved in it. And I was telling her they have the right to say they were not if they were not involved. And nothing I said mattered. She truly believes that they were all involved in this alleged document, which is obviously a stitched together, ill-designed hoax. It falls apart. It has holes in it. The timeline of it is wrong. The design of the letter is incorrect according to the manner in which a person would actually write a letter, and that is Commander Willard Miller. He does not agree with how it was written at all regarding how he would write a letter. That he is a type A personality. He would never make any of the novice level mistakes that were made in that letter. And if you listen to one of our other podcasts, I think it's called Disinformation, or along those lines, I go into great detail regarding what Commander Willard Miller said in that first interview when I talked to him about the smoking gun memo, the smoking gun document. Anyway, go ahead, Frank, if you feel like you need to.
Yeah, I think I got everything out that I need to get out. Just got asked a question in the chat. Once the distractors are woken up, where should we be putting our attention? And I don't know just yet. I think we're in kind of a weird moment here where who knows what's going to come up next. I did hear some scuttlebutt that maybe a study was in the offing. We didn't see anything specifically related to a study per se, but TTSA did put something out about the metamaterials again, so maybe something is coming up down the road. Maybe they've got some studies in and have something interesting, so maybe there'll be something with that. Not really sure. Congress, I think, with this letter from Representative Walker that came out, who's an interesting guy, and we'll be talking a little bit more about him this coming Tuesday night when we have Derek Gilbert on. Very interesting fellow, had recently written that letter to the Secretary of the Navy asking about some of the evidence and especially the remote sensing data that they may have picked up. I think that might bear some fruit. You never know. We will see. I think we just gotta kind of read and react and see what's coming up next. I think this is just about done. They say that they're doing more over on the pro-doc side, but I haven't seen it, and they've had a couple months now, and I haven't seen anything. Literally, I haven't seen a single thing that is even interesting that adds to it. It's just a lot of conversation and a lot of people agreeing with each other. That's what I see at the moment. If they come up with something great, like I say, I am aware that there are some folks that are looking into sort of the way the document is presented. That there's this. The special access program that Wilson allegedly followed up on and met with a panel of people from from Lockheed. Let's not kid ourselves here. That's who it's supposed to be, even though it's not specifically mentioned. And that they're following up. That there are some individuals who kind of fit the profile, who had the high-ranking Pentagon positions, and then moved over into the private sector. And that's probably the way you would do it if you were looking to hide this stuff. You're not going to just turn it over over to a corporation, you're going to make sure that you've got your guys in there to kind of keep an eye on things and shepherd it over there, and not kind of keep it. You want your guys keeping an eye on the lock and key. And that seems pretty plausible. So hopefully we do get some more out of this. Hopefully some follow-up is being done, and we will find out some good stuff. But as far as these documents being legitimate in and of themselves, I think we pretty well destroyed that.
Okay, now in the beginning, when we were sort of interrupting each other, which we're legendary for, by the way, people,
We're well known for that.
It's so funny. I've actually had people just an aside.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah,
I have had people actually
about us interrupting each other and talking over each other. We hear about that all the time.
That's normal for us. And by the way, just so everybody knows, we do argue all the time.
Constantly.
Yes.
You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Right. So anyway, in the beginning when we were interrupting each other like crazy, like we always do, I actually lost my notes because I had a bunch of interleaving documents in front of me and I lost them. So that's why I kind of stuttered and it took me a while. But this is what I had wanted to read. It was just a note I had on the Rugge. And that is terms like Rugge, which is on page 6 of the alien autopsy memo, also known as the AAM, are incorrect for describing brain folds, if that is what Kit was allegedly referencing, since there's a plethora of medical terms regarding brain-related terminology throughout the AAM that Kit Green is actually spouting off in that memo, allegedly. Now, Rugge are ridges and folds found in the stomach, digestive systems that allow for expansion. And I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but the gyrus, I believe, and the succulus are folds seen on the brain. Dr. Green would be more precise in this. He would not call a Rugge the brain, a part of the brain, when it's clearly not. So this is the problem I have also, which I don't understand why people aren't bringing this to Kit Green's attention. Although I know that allegedly he has reviewed the alien autopsy memo with Richard Dolan. So why would he have not caught his own mistake? And also, why would he have made that mistake? Why would somebody at his level call part of the brain the stomach?
My only speculation here is they just don't want to go into a lot of detail on this.
Well, but they should. Because
maybe they should, but
yes, they should. That is a glaring error. And I can tell you this, any doctor out there that is a doctor that specializes in the brain, if you were to read that, another doctor said that, he would take exception with that. And that is clearly an issue regarding a discrepancy and a hole. It only adds to it regarding the AAM. It is part of the history of it. So it's not it's not might have, Frank. It is a problem. The other thing is, wanted to ask you about is, let's see. I think, did you have any issues with the Singaporean government model Lee Kuan Yew meritocracy, Plato, Thomas Paine, Machiavelli, Aristotle, Jefferson, Roosevelt comment that Kit Green allegedly went off on? That was a really strange part of these series of emails between people who were colleagues with each other. How did you feel about that?
I did not really dig in on that part, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's a really odd rant. By the way, did you ever find the smoking gun, the alien autopsy memo link?
I did not.
Okay. All right. Now, there's also a strange style of military timestamp used in the same header in the alien autopsy memo as the one that also has another style of AM/PM stamp. And that was a very strange anomaly that needs further investigation. And regarding a paragraph on page 11, I think that you'll see that there's a strange anomalous reference from Hal to his peers requesting that they read an alleged Zodiac group. Read about an alleged Zodiac group by a comic book author with the pseudonym Sledge Masters. And I just found that really strange that he would write to his colleagues about that. See, this is the thing. I myself would love the opportunity to speak to Kit Green and really ask him about things that you and I dissected regarding this odd memo that's being claimed as real by a lot of people. And nobody is asking him these questions. I'd like to know why they're not. Um, uh, uh, Also, let's see if there's anything else I can bring up here. I wanted to know, let's see, you already went over the NIDS Bigelow thing.
Yep.
And, right. And,
Not too much on that. Like I said,
right.
it's an
But
ordinary letter.
it's also true to say that that cannot be verified along with the AAM and the SG. There is no provenance that proves that NIDS Bigelow, that when we say NIDS, by the way, we're talking about an acronym,
Right.
NIDS.
National Institute of Discovery Science. It was
Right.
Bob Bigelow's group.
Right. Which actually in 1995, with John Alexander and Eric Davis, went to Skinwalker Ranch. Just so everybody knows what, a little bit of history behind NIDS there. And anyway, that NIDS/Bigelow document that Grant Cameron put forward for everybody to be able to scrutinize and look over, in conjunction with the smoking gun document, that cannot be proven, actually came out of the estate of Edgar Mitchell. Now, can also not be proven, despite the fact that James Rigney claims to have given, and Grant Cameron agrees with this, I believe, that James Rigney gave the smoking gun document to Grant Cameron, that it can also not be proven that came out of the estate or files of Edgar Mitchell.
Right,
There
right.
is
And
no way to prove that.
Yeah, let me jump in.
Please
Rigney James has said that the documents were given to him by someone from the aerospace industry. So that's all we've gotten from him. That's how he's gotten it. He didn't get it. He has not said that he's gotten it directly from the Mitchell estate or anything along those lines. He was given the documents by someone in the aerospace industry. So there's that.
Right. So anytime there's a hoax that's created, one can expect a cover up in tandem with that hoax. Someone planted these hoaxed documents, and I'm talking about the AAM and the SG, into the worldwide community. A superficial case with a false narrative by a few high-profile people in the UFO community has been created either in an unintentional or intentional manner. No court of law would ever accept these alleged docs as real evidence, facts, or proof into evidence to be relied upon to use to support or prove a case as true. The correct answers here regarding these alleged docs are these things. 1, we do not know the real source of these alleged docs, meaning who actually designed them. 2, the amount of true material in these docs is both unknown and low so far regarding what can be measured as true. There can be more said that is false than true also regarding the AAM and the SG. One cannot be a conspiracy theorist and have their cake and eat it too. You cannot claim a conspiracy like what Melinda Leslie postulated and then claim that hypothesis as correct according to the standards of evidence, facts, and proof. It's not even possible to do that. What we have come to expect from people pushing the AAM and SG as real is providing pseudo evidence and so-called proof and let others ask questions later. The AAM and SG, they were designed as a game to destroy friendships, to create circular discussions, and to disseminate disinformation. In this sense, these false documents have been a complete success. Now,
well, we'll see. And I mean, the best case scenario is that it does provide some leads.
Okay, but Frank, you just said we'll see. We just did. Yeah. These are not real.
No, yeah. I was strongly suspicious of them before they even came out. But I do know from my own experience that sometimes this type of information can provide leads, that this UFO research stuff is a kind of a slow dime game. That this meeting with Wilson and Greer and Mitchell and Miller happened 20 years ago. And you never know. You follow up with some of these people and you don't know what they're going to say 20 years after the fact. That maybe somebody's willing to say, well, yeah, there's a little bit more to that maybe there is a little bit of truth in there. when you go back over time, or you just get leads. You get names cobbled together that you hadn't thought about before, like some of the other names that were mentioned in the smoking gun document. Let's see. There was let me pull up some of those names here.
Okay.
There was a General Hall, I believe, that was mentioned. There was a General Kostelnik, I believe, who was mentioned. There was a Gansler who was mentioned, and they are also mentioned in that. Well, a couple of them anyway. Gansler was mentioned, and I believe the man's name is Hall. But let me double check on that. General Hall. General Ward, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm thinking of Michael Hall. I'm getting all confused here in my old age. General Marshall Hall, who was mentioned in this Jane's. I'm going to post this link again because it's a good article where his name is mentioned and also mentioned in the smoking gun doc. There are leads in there. This is something, this entire meeting was something that I can remember Edgar Mitchell talking about sort of vaguely. I know he was talking about it now. I didn't realize it at the time. When this discussion was really hot initially, was like a year before I got seriously into it, and I do remember him discussing it sort of vaguely in broad general terms after the fact in interviews, because anytime there was an Edgar Mitchell interview, I obviously listened. So I do remember it. But this is something that, hey, maybe it's time to go back and take a look at that meeting and take a look at some of these names of people who had key positions back in those days, like Dr. Jacques Gansler, like Major General Marshall H. Ward, and go back and see if maybe it's time. Maybe some new information can come out about this stuff. That is the best case scenario that I see now. But the worst case scenario is just for high-profile researchers to continue to run around and present these documents as literal documents, as literal fact, when they really just are not providing anything to make that case. I mean, there's no case there. They don't have a leg to stand on. And I did post that link again to that article in Jane's. It's a good article. I suggest everybody at least take a look at it. web.archive.org, web, and then another hyphen and / 2009. It's a good article. It drops some names, and again, those are some of the names that are turning up in this smoking gun doc. Like I say, it's researched. I mean, who knows? Maybe the person who put this together read this Jane's defense and read the Periscope and was able to cobble it together from the armchair. I don't think that's the case. Like I said, I've been saying from the beginning that this is well put together stuff. This looks like professional stuff. It's why I'm calling it disinformation, because that's what disinformation is. It's not some private sector lunatic who's running around making ridiculous claims about time traveling to Mars with Barack Obama and stuff like that. Those are just private sector lunatics and idiots basically doing that kind of thing. Now, this is clearly professional work. I don't think there's any question about that. And this is what we're seeing. This is what disinformation looks like, these documents. That's disinformation. And again, some of it could well provide a lead that can follow up, and we can get some interesting information out of it. Hopefully that happens.
We also cannot make fit what isn't true. People need to be accountable for things that they're claiming are true when they're not. And it's important because I don't know. Maybe I do know you probably recall the Jaime Maussan fake alien debacle.
Oh, I know a lot about that. I know a lot about that. And
yes, and go ahead.
Well, Tony Bergalia is a good friend of mine, and I got to tell you that I believe that he believed it right up until the very end. I think that they got, if any real hoaxing was done, it was done by Adam Dew, who found the original slide, and there was a little bit of a story I think made up about that, about finding it in some secret compartment in a chest at in some lady's house. But he got hold of the slide. The slide was legitimate for what it was, but it turned out to be a picture of a mummy, certainly not an alien. But I was in communication with Tony about that for quite a bit before everything came out. And I believe people can believe. I mean, there's a strong will to believe. No question about it.
Well, my understanding is that Richard Dolan actually believed that alien was real.
Well, he did go down there. There was they had like a little live stream event down in Mexico, and for whatever reason,
it wasn't little. There were people from all over the world that attended that. I actually met a few, and they were very upset that they actually allowed themselves to fall to that level of deception. And, that was a worldwide event. A lot of people attended that Mexico conference that you're talking about. And it was highly disappointing, not only in the sense of the folks who felt that had been victimized or that they had allowed themselves to actually believe in something that was not true, but also that the UFO community once again was put in a light where we're the topic of hilarity or observed as a topic of hilarity. And, again, people need to be accountable for falling for things like this and wanting yes men to go along with them and the pressure of it. Just so you know, one reason why I stopped reporting and researching on this topic for a little while, Frank, I basically stopped researching it, I don't know, a while back, because these alleged docs, it was because researching these alleged docs because they're too easy to prove is not real. Literally.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
are
I mean,
that easy. And
we knocked it down pretty quick.
another is the people I had to come to look up to as beacons of searching for truth, or the closest thing to it in the UFO community, were not, due to an agenda, they were pushing over evidence, facts, and proof. The AAM and SG being the example of what I'm talking about here. Because these hoax docs became a game in the UFO community. Instead of using skill sets to determine whether we were looking at something real or not, all of these people that I looked up to, including a very small group of haters, use these hoax docs to devolve the process of evidence, facts, and proof. So, the UFO community observed a small camp of people all hoarding fake evidence and proof that they didn't have because they had an agenda to push, that being a pro-AAM and pro-SG agenda, as if they were real. And the backlash that you and I had to deal with regarding their response in varying ways, due to our research proving that they were wrong, that these so-called documents are not real in their entirety, was outrageous. We actually came across, I'm not going to say this person's name, but because of our research and because I said that I was looking forward to any evidence, proof, or facts regarding the AAM and SG, an individual we both know, who we will not name, actually ended up threatening another person that they were going to come out with some negative information about them because that person, who was high profile, would not go along with verbally abusing us. And that's a level some people have stooped to in order to try and make us go along with acting like we believe that these fake documents are real as they stand.
Well,
And
if you call yourself a researcher and your first loyalty is not to the truth, you're not a researcher.
We should all have one goal,
I mean,
and
it's as
that
simple
is
as
to
that.
ensure all the information, facts, and evidence and proof, if there are any to be had, are compiled to reveal whether these alleged docs are real as they stand, and everything points to justify these are not real in their entirety. Now, I want to also mention, there's I cannot say his name, I won't do it, but there's a high-profile individual, legendary in the UFO community, and I told him, I would like to interview you about the AAM and SG because he's key. He is key regarding the one of these documents. And he knew that I was going to interview Ray Santilli. And I told him, I said, may I please interview you regarding these, documents? And he said, let's just see. He didn't, this is not an exact quote, but the gist of what he said was, let's see how the Ray Santilli interview goes. What I took that to mean is this. Because this individual, who's key to what we're talking about here, he's connected. If I didn't do a pro-AAM interview, meaning act like I believed that document was real, that based on that, with Ray Santilli, that based on that, there's no way he would do an interview with me.
That's fine.
And I find that to be reprehensible. And I also looked up to this individual. I thought that he was a luminary in the area of the ufology because he's been involved in it for decades. And because he said that, I came to realize that he's not a person who is looking for truth, facts, or evidence regarding this particular topic. He's trying to push an agenda, and I'm not going to do that. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I think we've got everything out that we've gotten. We have ginned up the new material, frankly, that is useful and helpful to people in terms of helping them make a decision in terms of the legitimacy of these docs. I think we've done exactly what we're supposed to do. I really couldn't care less with Richard Dolan saying we don't know what we're doing. We know exactly what we're doing. And I think we have accomplished it.
Well, and this is the thing. I don't know if he said that, but let's just pretend he did.
Well, he did say it. I don't know specifically. Okay. Yeah, since we're the only people that are really out there doing anything as far as researching this stuff, and from a critical standpoint,
right.
Then I mean, he
from a critical
knows
standpoint.
what we're saying.
Well, look, I'm gonna say this. If he did say that, I know you just said he did. What I have to say is this. Until there is actual evidence, facts, or proof regarding the alien autopsy memo and the smoking gun document, then say that to us. Because there is nothing that actually supports these two alleged documents as real as they stand in their entirety. Now, one thing I would like to bring back up again.
Yep, prove Admiral Wilson was in Vegas. That would be a nice start.
Yes. One thing you can start with is that, Richard Dolan. The other thing you can start with is explaining why John Alexander's email address and Hal Puthoff's email address in the alien autopsy memo is listed as, it's attributed to General Motors in Singapore, when neither one of these gentlemen has ever worked for General Motors or Singapore, according to John Alexander, who has known Hal Puthoff also for decades.
Right.
Now, we do know that Eric Davis was the vice president of General Motors in Singapore.
Kit Green.
I'm sorry, Kit Green. Thank you. Now, we do know he was, but John Alexander and Hal Puthoff were not. Now, how in the world can anybody say that the alien autopsy memo is genuine if that snippet is clearly not true?
Exactly.
Okay? That's just an impossibility.
And so many other things,
There's so many other things. There's a list of them.
Stuff
I've already given the list.
Yeah, and the key thing to me initially when I spoke to Commander Miller was he has no interest in the Socorro or the Holloman case.
And why does that matter in regards to what we're talking about? Just so people can.
In the Serpo material, there's an attempt to tie the Socorro case, the date of the Socorro case, which was, I believe, off the top of my head, April 24th, 1964, to the alleged meeting, the meetup, supposedly that happened between the United States Air Force and extraterrestrials at Holloman Air Force Base. And apparently ET is able to travel several light years to get here, but gets lost and can't find Holloman Air Force Base, and they accidentally land in Socorro. I mean, part of it is downright hilarious. And that was actually one of the things that I mentioned with Michael the first time that we had him on before these docs came out. Look out for this kind of thing, and there it was right in there. So yeah, that was one of the key things that I wanted to ask Commander Miller about. What do you think about these cases? And listed off the cases that were listed in the smoking gun doc, and he asked me, what's the Socorro case? There's that.
Well, so let me ask you this, Frank. When Richard Dolan, according to a good source I have, who is a person that's very close to him, and also the research I've done, fell for the alien hoax that Jaime Maussan was shopping around as real. my
Well,
question to you,
yeah,
go ahead.
let me go into that a little bit. Remember, this happened after the fact. It was basically Don Carey, or excuse me,
Hmm.
Tom Carey, Don
Okay.
Schmidt, and Tony Bragalia, who first were following up on this alien slide. That a fellow named Adam Dew out of Chicago had gotten
Hmm.
hold of. Okay, so they were trying to shop it around as doing something here in the States, and they couldn't get that done. So Masan came in a little bit later. It wasn't
Hmm.
Masan's baby,
Okay.
really. Initially,
Right.
it
No.
was Carrie Schmidt and Tony who were working on this, and they did
Right.
some background work. Basically, was the slide was the film stock or the slide
Hmm.
stock, whatever it was printed up on, was it from that time frame, the late 1940s and so on. And they did a lot of research about that. But basically, the case was fairly easily solved once the picture became public. There was a group looking to, frankly, debunk it. There were a few people involved. Kirk Collins was in that group. My old buddy Lance Moody was in that group. And another fellow whose name was Nab Latour, I believe, and he was the guy who actually figured out how to use a particular software called Smart Deblur, which was able to deblur the slide, and as a result you could see what was written on a little placard, and basically it was a photograph taken in a museum of a mummy that was discovered somewhere in the Southwest, maybe 100 years ago or so. I'm not sure exactly when, but that case fell apart fairly quickly, and it was unfortunate. But like I said, I know Tony, and I'll vouch that right up until the end, he thought he had something, and I generally will hold that out that people do think that they think they've got something. They may not, they may be proved wrong, but generally speaking, I think they believe that they have something.
Okay, well, I did want to read something from Spiros, and when I interviewed him, and by the way, he did just give me permission this evening while we were talking to go ahead and give his email address out on the podcast to Richard Dolan so that Richard Dolan can contact him regarding what he had me read to him tonight. And that is Spiros's email address is Mr. M. So that's MRM at gical.co.uk. So let me go ahead and read that again. MRM
You want to stick that in the
at,
chat or not?
yeah, I can do that, at gical.co.uk. And let me go ahead and copy that, but I still have something to say, so just take
Okay.
a second. Just one moment.
We've already gone
There
on
we go.
about it. Okay.
Yeah, but let me go ahead and read what Spiros had to say about the AAM. He said,
Okay.
I cannot emphasize enough that this entire document is not verified at all. I would be more sympathetic if they were speaking about an alien autopsy and did not say it was the same as mine. I don't know if they have alien bodies or if they did an autopsy or three. How could I? But when they make schoolboy errors and say it's from Roswell and say it's the same as mine and predated when mine did not even exist, then I know it's bullshit. And then I said, do you have any more input to share on the alien autopsy memo? That's it. The whole thing is just unsubstantiated stories. The key is green, but we all surely know an ex-CIA agent would not talk about classified stuff in this way. It's just ridiculous. And I asked him, why do you think this document was fabricated? And he went on to explain what his thoughts were on that. So I'm going to go ahead and share that link
And
to that.
he has some interesting insight because let's face it, I mean, he was involved in putting this together. We talked to Phil Mantle, and Phil had mentioned he estimated that they grossed from different sources around the world a good $14-15 million back in the 90s off this little project that cost a few grand to produce. So there was a nice profit margin in there for those guys, but at least Spiros has come forward, and I don't blame those guys for doing that. I mean, hey, it's a few quick bucks and turned into a nice little small fortune for him. But I think what's happened there is maybe Santilli and the other fellows, Shu, I can't recall his last name. I'm sorry, Gary. You know the guy. You spoke to him,
Gary Shewfield. Sorry about that.
Shewfield,
Go ahead.
sorry. Gary Shewfield. And, I think maybe they thought that, they did the interviews with you, and maybe they thought that this would get some more attention. They'd be able to, get a few more bucks out of, basically this old project that they did 20 plus years ago. I don't think that's happening. The way Dolan was predicting that this was really going to take off and generate a lot of attention. It really hasn't. It's it's gotten the attention of a relatively small crowd, to be honest about it.
Well, and you know what? Oddly enough, Spiros Malaris actually summed up everything so perfectly in the thread of a post that we were talking about a post under Dolan, about Dolan in a group on Facebook. And he said this, because we were discussing, this is what he said. So when he says, I agree, it's because we were having a discussion. He said, Chant, Hannah, I fully agree. And for what it's worth, I too question the authenticity of the document, meaning the alien autopsy memo, because it's full of holes. How can it be real and at the same time wrong? Now, that one statement he said, how can it be real and at the same time wrong? That sums everything up. He then said, we have seen the story change by the week. We're getting closer to the truth, but are still a way to go. Now, this is something else I wanted to bring up to you, Frank, and that is this. Throughout all the podcasts that have been done on these topics that we've been talking about here, there has not been the same kind of information brought forth. It's all contradictory. So it's really important that people understand that if there's facts and evidence and proof to discuss, that would remain the same. That is not the case with these two alleged documents. That's it.
Okay, then that's about it. We're done?
That's it.
We're done? Okay, I think we might be done with this subject. You did compile a lot of material on the alien autopsy video, and you should probably get that up in some way, shape, or form just to hear these guys speak for themselves. At some point, we'll figure out a way to do that. It's a fascinating story. It really is. I mean, honest to God, if I could turn a few grand into 15 million, I'd do it in a heartbeat, to tell you the truth. But I haven't come up with that idea yet. So anything else in closing, Chan? I think we wrapped this up pretty neatly. More might happen. I don't know. We're not really working it that hard over the last few weeks. That pretty much wrapped up a little while ago, and we're kind of waiting to see if anything else would come from the other side. And of course, it really hasn't. Just more conversation. So I think we're almost certainly done with this. There's always a chance that some more might come up, but I think we're pretty well done with it.
Okay, thank you.
We're done?
I'm good. Yes,
Alrighty.
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So, Chant, we're going to wrap up. We got a big week coming up over the next week. We've got 3 shows starting Sunday. Professor Kevin Knuth is going to be back with us, and he has had a busy year in the last year getting all in with the UFO stuff. I had him on the show last summer, so it's been a year since I've spoken to him directly, and that's going to be a lot of fun because he's had a very interesting year getting more directly involved in the UFO material. And then we've got Derek Gilbert Tuesday night, who is a Christian broadcaster who's going to be hosting a conference coming up shortly. We're going to talk in a lot of detail about that. And then we've got Thursday night, we've got Mr. Rudnick. Tell the folks at home a little bit about Mr. Rudnick. Marion Rudnick.
Yes. You know, I actually did a 2.5-hour interview with him today. He's a fascinating individual. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and hold off on talking about him for right now.
But we have 3 shows scheduled next week, so it's going to be a busy week. We got more stuff coming. This is kind of an afterthought, but we want to get this done because quite frankly nobody else is doing it. So we wanted to get it finished.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, everybody, you have a great night. Enjoy your weekend. And it's going to be Sunday night when we're back with Professor Kevin Knuth. Looking forward to it. Have a good one. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.